This is not the work of the Virgin Mary. It's the work of the unholy.
Faith in evil empowers evil.
We are talking The Unholy, which is also known as Shrine. Now, this is actually based off a novel by James Herbert called Shrine, Herbert being one of the most kind of famous horror authors kind of behind Stephen King, and actually probably been my personal favourite horror author, and I have actually read Shrine, although it was a long time ago. Now, this one stars Jeffrey Dean Morgan, he of Negan fame, of course, from The Walking Dead. And this is kind of a religious horror. Now, just to get it out of the way, I am not a religious person, but I do quite enjoy a religious horror film. Now, Jeffrey Dean Morgan plays a journalist who is somewhat disgraced. He's kind of working for a tabloid magazine, and he's on some kind of dead-end assignment looking for cow mutilations. And he happens across a kind of series of events, shall we say, where we have this young girl who is deaf and mute, seemingly able to communicate all of a sudden, and she is, you know, everyone kind of hails it as possibly a miracle, and she believes that Mary, the Virgin Mary, is actually kind of talking through here, and she performs a series of miracles to obviously this crowd who all kind of eat it up. And, you know, the Vatican sends investigators and whatnot, and it all looks hunky-dory. It all looks like there's a genuine miracle here. However, there may well be a darker side to this story. I'm not going to go any further than that with a kind of synopsis. You'll have to watch the movie to find out what happens. So let's discuss, I think, what works with this movie. Without going into any spoilers, the main thing I would say I did enjoy about this movie is the antagonist, let me just put it like that, of this movie, I think has a good modus operandi, a good kind of gimmick where I think it's quite clever, and the way it uses deceptiveness is quite intriguing, and I think it really does play on people's willingness to kind of go along with things. Again, I'm trying to be as vague as I possibly can here, but nonetheless, you know, we get some kind of backstory through some exposition and such, and obviously what we learn through events within the film. But nonetheless, I felt the kind of the idea behind this antagonist is very strong, and makes for a quite interesting, antagonist where they're doing there's some good stuff that's happening, but there's also a price to pay, and it kind of makes you kind of wonder: is the price obviously going to be too high? So I found that kind of side, again, without kind of going too much into it, that type of stuff is pretty interesting. There's also commentary on how kind of people will just kind of believe and stuff like that, what they're kind of told. And it's, again, I think especially with parallels with kind of social media and stuff, it really does tie into, I think, today's audiences, although it doesn't kind of directly reference that necessarily. But you can kind of, it's somewhat timely in a weird way. I thought the acting of this movie was very good. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, he's a very, very charismatic actor, and and he's still got his kind of swagger charm like he does in The Walking Dead. But I think everyone here does a pretty good job. You've got a couple of other recognisable faces. William Sadler, Carrie Elwes. They both play, priests and stuff like that. But I thought the acting was for the most part pretty good. There's a couple of kind of neat jump scares which I enjoyed. I really enjoyed the music. I thought the music was a typical kind of sort of gothic-y, religious kind of style kind of music. But I thought it really worked well within the movie. And there are a couple of kind of quite fun, scary sequences within the film itself. I think the movie is quite well paced. I actually feel, if anything, it maybe goes a little bit too quick, if I'm honest, which will kind of lead me into maybe what didn't work so well. I do think some things feel like they're a little bit brushed past, because this is an adaptation of a novel. Obviously, it has to be kind of reworked for the screen, and I do feel some things are kind of lost here in kind of translation, and we just kind of brush past a few things. The thing that really annoyed me most about, or maybe not annoyed, but I felt was the weaker part of the story here, was it relies quite heavily on conveniences. Again, I don't want to go into specifics because I don't want to go into plot details necessarily, but nonetheless, I feel the movie does rely quite heavily on sort of plot conveniences and kind of people doing things at the right time and stuff like this, and people happening to find things and stuff. So it does kind of feel a little bit kind of cheap and that. And I think maybe I can't remember if this was really in the book, if I'm honest. But nonetheless, I can't help but feeling a lot of this was just down to kind of like movie circumstances and things like that. The other thing of note, I would say, is I think the CGI here is on the weaker side, despite this being a more mainstream kind of horror film, and therefore, have a bit of a bigger budget compared to, a lot of kind of its peers and kind of straight to kind of video and that sort of stuff. The CGI, it looks like CGI. Let me just pull up that. I mean, it's not the worst I've ever seen, but the kind of when we see supernatural things happening on screen, and again, I don't want to spoil what exactly happens, but we see, entities. It kind of looks a little, or even the way it moves and stuff, it kind of looks CGI. It doesn't look kind of real. And I think, again, this is a problem for the industry. People relying on too much on CGI rather than kind of going through the painstaking process of practical effects a lot of the time. But as so, we end up kind of getting cookie cutter kind of effects really that I feel age quite kind of badly. And I think this was going to be a good example of where in a few years' time, the effects here are going to look pretty dated. The ending as well, I kind of have mixed feelings with. I liked kind of the idea behind the ending, but it comes across as a little cheesy and trite. So overall, it's pretty much a kind of a somewhat standard supernatural religious horror, but I think it's slightly elevated above average by its performances, and I do like the kind of the MO of this antagonist, with the way it kind of uses iconography to get people to kind of do what it wants and things like that. I think it's quite clever. So I will just pop it above average for a 6 out of 10 for me. It's a worthwhile watch. It's entertaining. Maybe it has a few too many cheap jump scares. But overall, it's watchable, it's enjoyable, it's just not particularly kind of mould-breaking in any sense of the word. 6 out of 10, have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.